Kaden's dad, and we were going to talk a little bit about our antler wall. I've been hunting since I was in 8th grade. I took my first deer in 8th grade. It was a doe, obviously not on the wall, but ever since then, many years later, it's probably 33 years of hunting, and this is a bit of what's to show from it. So this here was my very first deer, or very first buck, that is. I was a freshman in college, and we had done a lot of scouting in the area. This was opening morning. I had walked in about 2.5, 3 miles with my dad. He split off from where I was going. I dropped down into this small ravine. This was kind of an interesting story of an area we were first starting to hunt, and there's some private lands and things through there. There was a landowner that thought we were trespassing, but we knew our boundaries very well. He actually drove right up to where I was standing and started yelling at me, and I walked over and was very calm. Told him, no, this is an area that we have access to, and he realized that was the truth. And all of a sudden, as we were standing there was a group of deer that crested the ridge, started coming over towards us, and I immediately saw that there was a legal buck in the group. This area is a 3-pointer better, and this deer ran past us, and I said, I'll see you later. So I took off after this deer. This deer ran down the bottom of the ravine, came up the other side, and I got in a position, got down on my bipod, and one shot. It was about 150 yards away, and down he went. As I was first coming up to him, he jumped up and ran past me about 10 yards and fell back down, and I gave him a coup de grace. 2x3. As I say, it was a 3-pointer better area. The buck dressed out at 145 pounds, and it was a number of years ago, in 1997. So to talk through another buck that was pretty special, there was an area we hunted often in college, actually the same place I got my first deer. My dad and I were heading over to this area that we had hunted in the past. He went over the top of one ridge, I split off to another spot. As I'm walking along, I heard a shot, and I knew it was my dad, who hopefully was successful. Then right as that shot echoed out, I saw this buck go over the top of this ridge, still quite a ways away from me. And so I watched him. He worked his way down this draw and then kind of disappeared, and then I couldn't see him anymore. So I worked my way over closer to where I could see maybe down there to this draw, and I could see this buck bedded. And he was all by himself, which was perfect. So I made my way beyond him down this other ravine, and then came up over the top and crested the ridge and knew I could be within shooting range of this deer. Sure enough, everything worked out very well. As I popped over the top, he got up, and I put a round in him and dropped him. And we had 2 deer down at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and they were actually very nice, big-bodied animals. That was a pretty special deer, first 4-point that I had ever taken. And my dad had taken a real nice 4-point as well that was actually with this deer. So we took both two big bucks out of this big canyon area. And he dressed at 156 pounds. My dad's buck dressed at 175 pounds, and my brother's buck dressed at 170 pounds. So we had a lot of bone and meat to haul out of that country. So the only whitetail buck I've ever taken is the one shown right up here, 4x4. This was a late season November hunt that right in the rut time frame. Pretty special hunt. Both my brother and I had a tag. We had just finished up our school term, and we ended up heading out that morning. Snow was expected that evening. We got up that next morning, and there was about 4 to 5 inches of snow down, which was tremendous. Hunting in snow, fresh snow that's quiet, the deer just pop from super far away. So first thing we did, we were both on opposite ends of 2 ridges going down the ridge lines, watching the other side of each other's ridges to signal if we see anything. Sure enough, I'm walking along, look further down the ridge line my brother was at, and there's a buck and a doe, and just with my own eye, he was probably about 500 to 600 yards away. I could tell he was a big buck. He ended up being a 5x5 whitetail, real nice big thick mass. I all of a sudden was waving my arms, and my brother got his binoculars up, looked, and I'm motioning rack and this direction, and get down, just be really careful. He was only about maybe 150 yards at this point, and I knew as he was going to start to sneak closer on this same ridge line, he was going to have a really close shot if he was going to have a shot. So so he's working his way in. All of a sudden, and it's at these moments when I get the most nervous. It's not myself that's hunting; it's watching the people that I am supporting hunting. And I'm shaking, I'm watching through the binoculars, and all of a sudden I could see these 2 deer perk their heads up. They're looking the direction of my brother, and what does he do? He slowly lifts his rifle up, offhand, and I see the buck just drop right there, and then you hear the echo of the sound come across the canyon, and oh my gosh, what an exciting time. I hightailed it down the ridge, or down the canyon, back up the ridge. We ended up starting to pull that deer out of that country. And as we were doing that, taking breaks, we looked back up on the ridge that I was actually on originally. There was a buck and a doe working their way up the ridge. So we dropped everything. My brother was doing the hand signals. I went all the way down to the bottom of that canyon again, hiked up the other side, started coming up into the spot where I expected them to be, and sure enough, there's the doe leading the way, and the buck was following. I had a grunt call in which they were moving along, and bucks in the rut, they can just keep moving and moving and moving. Sometimes it's really hard to get a shot because they're just so active. That grunt call stopped him, and he was actually going across away from me, and that grunt call turned him just enough so that I could get a shot down the length of his ribs and into his vitals, and shot, knew it was a good shot. He jumped over the fence and fell down right there. So we had 2 bucks down in this country. Snow was finally starting to melt, so it wasn't too bad getting them out, but it was a pretty amazing time. Just never gotten a whitetail, and we get 2 in one day, and really quite the dream. So I had the opportunity to do a mule deer hunt that was in the rut. You don't get those very often, at least in the state of Oregon. We had scouted multiple weekends in a row. Kaden, my dad, brother, we all really were hitting the hills, seeing some really nice quality bucks. When the hunt started, it was really kind of starting to taper off when it came to rut activity, and the bucks were starting to break away from the does. So the timing of the hunt was a little bit tricky. It took us several days to be able to pin down some deer. We saw some real nice ones from a distance, and never could connect on them. This buck actually was one that we had scouted the week before. In fact, Kaden he was the one that spotted him. He broke away from the truck doing his business, and typically when you're doing that, that's when kind of crazy things sometimes happen. So he ran back to the truck and said, "Yeah, big buck, big buck." And so I came towards him, joined up with him. We crested this subtle ridge line, and sure enough, there was a group of several deer. There was 2 bucks in the group. One was a 2-point, and then this one was with him. He's got real dark antlers, and so we nicknamed him Chocolate. And little did we know, we were able to find him after several days of trying to locate him again. We really liked his back forks. That was the best buck we had seen when it came to deep forks. We saw some wider bucks, but this was one that came together. I think it was day 3 or day 4, I want to say. And actually, Kaden again saw this deer. We had some really nasty weather. My dad and I got out of the truck. Kaden was still in the truck and ended up seeing it. Of course, I didn't see it, and my dad didn't see it. And it wasn't until Kaden said, "Dad, there's a big buck in there." And I was like, "What?" So sure enough, we started looking at this group of deer closer and found him in amongst these trees. There was about 6 or 7 does that he was still hanging out with. And I went after him, went down this ravine. These trees were pretty thick. It looked like those deer were gonna move away from us, and they just settled down into the trees. They kept kind of roaming back and forth and doing their thing, and then the does started funneling out into this window of where the trees were at, and I figured there's a really good chance that buck's gonna follow. And so I just planted myself and my bipod all set up about 300 yards away. Nice steady rest, and sure enough, I could see him starting to come through, see his rack coming through the trees, and then he just stepped out, and I gave a loud grunt call. He stopped, and I let it drive, and down he went.
So we came down this road here. We came down, went way over there, and we glassed up a bunch of does. Nothing all that spectacular. But then came back here, stopped here, glassed over here. He saw a doe, 2 does actually, and they ran up here, over there. They ran up, and then there was a buck behind them. I was like, "That's a big buck. That's a nice buck." And then we were just watching them, and my dad went down there. He walked down there. We were waiting for the gun to go off, and he did. I was looking right through the spotting scope. He just dropped him. So yeah, he didn't go anywhere. He smoked that guy.
We actually, this was one of our first experiences using Onyx. We were able to pin him. We drove all the way back around to this other ravine, about 3 miles around, parked the truck, and walked all the way back and found exactly where we pinned him on Onyx, which was quite a thrill. Didn't quite realize how nice of a buck he was. Yeah, it's bigger than I was thinking it was.
Yeah, me too. He's thick too.
Figured he was a decent buck, but his forks really jumped out at us, and we actually didn't realize that the buck we saw was Chocolate until we walked up on it. So this buck scored 154 6/8, and it was at the time our largest buck that we'd taken in our family. So I was fortunate enough after 16 years to get drawn on a pronghorn antelope tag in eastern Oregon. We had done a lot of scouting. These tags for pronghorn are early season and just beautiful bluebird weather. We'd seen a lot of pronghorn in the area. We actually saw opening morning a buck that we were trying to go after, being public land hunting. There were other guys that were going after him, and they were in a better spot than we were. So we pulled out of there. We knew there were a lot of pronghorn in the area, and we decided to go about 3 or 4 miles further away from where this other group was and these hunters were. figuring that you know, this big wide open stretch of sagebrush, there's going to be some good pronghorn in there. We started walking in, and we split up a little bit, so off I went, and sure enough I ended up seeing this group of pronghorn. There were about 10 to 12 does that were with this buck, and they were about probably a half a mile away. So I'm working my way in, and all of a sudden to my left there was a group of about 3 or 4 pronghorn does that were quite close to me, and I ended up getting pinned down for over 6 hours. It was 75, 80 degrees. I'm just getting cooked, just getting fried out there in the sun, and I ended up belly crawling within about 250 yards of him. And he had a harem of does in which he would continue to watch any one of those does to make sure that at least 1 or 2 of them were standing up at all times, looking around, and you know, making sure that the group was safe. And so it really made it tricky in wide open country, sagebrush that were only about maybe a foot tall, to be able to belly crawl in. I had my full face mask on and everything, so really taking all the precautions to make sure I could try to get on these animals. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon finally until I got into position, was shooting prone, and he then finally got up out of his bed, and all the pronghorn started moving. And so at that moment I figured it's now or never. And he got out into a spot where the others weren't, and I squeezed off, and down he fell right there. So yeah, we were about 3 miles away from the truck, and we boned him out, and we're careful to keep the cape, you know, all in good quality. These pronghorn have hair that are really fragile, so the taxidermist said we did a real nice job on making sure that the hair quality wasn't you know, damaged. But our first animal that we had ever caped out, he was just shy of 72 inches, and he had some pretty nice hooks to him and ivories on him, so it was pretty special. First pronghorn we had ever taken, actually the only pronghorn we've ever taken in our family. All right, so this was kind of a freakish hunt. So this was a cougar that I took in Washington. This was in the August time frame, just before I was going to be heading back to college. And the state of Washington at the time had banned hound hunting for bears and cougars. And this particular area that we had hunted elk in the past, we had actually seen a number of cougars and bears and coyotes, and it just had bobcats, it had predators galore in it. So we figured, let's find a way to go into this area, and a new way of hunting bears and cougars. We had seen video on calling these predators in. We had done some of that with coyotes, but really never bears and cougars. And just being that there's a lot of predators in the area, we thought it might be a pretty interesting experience. So we had hunted for about 2 or 3 weekends prior, and had tried the calling of a rabbit distress for I don't know how many sessions, but countless sessions. And all we ever had the success bringing in was great horned owls, ravens, maybe a hawk or 2, something like that. Nothing on the ground. So one morning we were going into this area. It was still a bit dark in a heavily timbered area, and it was a gated road system. We were walking along this road, and both my brother and I could hear something down below us into the trees, and we thought, boy, it doesn't sound like a deer or an elk. It doesn't sound like sticks and trebly sort of things, that hooves and things would tend to make sounds that would sound more like a deer or an elk. It was something just kind of slowly moving through the brush, and we thought, let's just set up right here. So we strung out our megaphone and tape player, back in the days of tape players and corded calls. It was a 30-foot cord, 10 yards. Set it out and got in a position. This was my last weekend of doing the bear and cougar hunting, so if there was an animal that would come out, I was going to be the one that would have first shot. So set up right there with my brother behind me, popped the player on, and the call started whining, and it wasn't a second or two after that sound started going from the call that we heard a bark. And it was kind of this trebly sort of bark down, not too far from us, down where the sound was coming from. And at the time after this all took place, we both thought in our minds, coyote. And so, you know, all of a sudden, as we heard the bark, we heard something running up the hill towards the sound of the call. And I got in a position real quick thinking, if it's a coyote, let's figure out what we're gonna do here, and, you know, maybe I'll shoot it. And just in case it might be something else. And out from the trees leaps this animal, pounces on top of the megaphone and buries it into the ground. And it was at that point, it's so close, I get my gun up and I'm trying to find it in the scope. I had my scope dialed all the way down to 3 power, and I was as low as it would go, and it was still tricky to be able to find that animal. I'm sure that it saw my movement. It turned towards me, it backed up and got down on the ground, and it went and growled at me. And just as it growled, I found the head and let drive. And down it fell. And it's at this moment, you know, the sound goes off in the forest. My brother and I stand up and we realize what has just happened. The adrenaline starts coming through your veins, and we're both shaken and just in disbelief of what really just happened there. We cautiously walked up to it because it was still kind of moving a little bit, but we knew it was definitely dead. And sure enough, there was this amazing animal. It was 7 feet 1 from nose to tail. It was a female cougar, about 100 pounds, but just this long, incredible animal. The claws have just a little bit of lethalness to them. I think the animal was closer than we really wanted it to be, but it ended up working out to be quite the special hunt. What was really remarkable too is the shot. As I found the head, I was really worried as we would walk up to this amazing animal and it would just be kind of a mess. It was probably the luckiest shot I've ever taken, in which it shot right through the mouth, didn't touch the lips, it exited the throat and went into the chest. And the result of the shot, you can see it took the edge of you can see that angle. It took the edge of the mouth out, and I was able to get it into the chest. So quite the set of canines on that animal. I'm sure it had taken several deer and maybe elk in its life. So I had been able to get drawn on a special tag. It took 18 years to get drawn on this elk tag, a premium elk tag in the Eastern Oregon area. We had scouted this area for about 6 years and always had dreamed of getting drawn on this area for branch bull. pretty special area, a lot of great memories, and to be able to connect on this animal was just that much more special. We had gone in the week before. It was bluebird weather. We set up a camp. We put our big tent down and knew this particular area was going to be the spot we were really wanting to focus on. The next week, it went from about 60-degree weather into about 8 to 10 inches of snow, and it was an area then we couldn't even access. We were able to pull our trailer in and be able to use the tent, but to be able to hunt out of there was just pretty much near impossible. We continued to get weather in the area, and so we had to put this particular area on pause. We went to some other locations and ended up coming back to this because we had actually seen this bull the week before. This bull and another bull were together. I saw them from probably a mile away, and I saw this bull, the special character to him. I nicknamed him Dagger Boy because his royals, his daggers, were pretty special. Something you don't get a lot of in this particular area. To have some nice length on that tine was something a little unique. So we nicknamed him Dagger Boy. So we came back. It was the third day of hunting, third day of the season, and my dad that morning of the third day had seen this bull way down about 2,000 feet down into this deep canyon by himself. And older bulls tend to hang out by themselves, or maybe with another bull or two. And sure enough, we decided, let's go in that afternoon, evening. Let's get ourselves into position. My dad was on the other hill, the other ridge line, about probably a mile away, and looking down into this area. And we knew where this guy lived, and just needed to put ourselves into this spot. So that evening, it started to get dark, and sure enough, out he came. I found him again by himself, feeding, got into position, got over the top of this ridge. I was really cautious about the wind. Actually, as I was sneaking down into this spot, there was a 5-point bull up on the ridge bedded, and I was really careful about trying to make sure I was on the other side of the ridge so that this 5-point wouldn't potentially see me and spook out of there, and I didn't know if this bull was with him or not. So I was able to get myself into position. It was 210 yards. This was a new rifle that I was testing out and using my 300 RUM, and put it right into the shoulder and took him right down. These animals are so tough. As I walked up to him, I had to put another one into his vitals, and he was still kicking after about 7 or 8 minutes, and I had to do another shot into his neck to be able to finally finish him off. But he scored 323, so it was a good bull. We've seen many bigger bulls in the area, but considering the weather and all of what transpired during the hunt, and the fact that I had seen him the week before and his real nice royals, I was pretty happy. Pretty special thing. Second bull I've ever taken. So here he is. There's that dagger that I was talking about. Nice length on him. He's actually a 7x6. You can see the unique curvature of that, and he's just got some real nice palmation all the way out to the very end. And he's heavy. It took 4 of us over 2 days to be able to pull him out of this country. As I said, he was over 2,000 feet down into this hole. So we headed out that evening, got back to camp after midnight, and then headed in the next morning and did one last trip with 4 guys.
I'm Kaden. I'm 1/3 of Hunting Shenanigans, and I'm going to show you a couple of my bucks I've taken over the years. And this is my first one, little 2-point, named him Forky for obvious reasons. Took him in 2020, 6 days after my birthday. We took him in a unit that our family's hunted for years and years and years. And it's my first tag that I drew. It was an any deer tag. It was kind of a special youth tag, and made it happen. Opening morning, hiked up to our usual location, and right as it was getting bright, right as the sun was coming up, looked down into this canyon, and there was this, he was bigger buck, but one side was completely broken off. So we decided to pass on that. I decided to pass on that and wait for better opportunity to present itself. So we continued to hike down into our spot, and then we sat for a little while, came up over, and a doe and a buck came up out of this draw up onto this wheat field. And my dad was like, it's a buck. So we got down. We were like, I don't know, it's a little far away. It's like, I think it was maybe 300 yards. We closed the distance a little bit to 300 yards. But I was like, I got him in my sights, I can take it. My dad was like, okay, let her rip. Get 300 yards is a pretty far shot for my first harvest, but made it happen. Drilled him on the first hit. He kind of jumped up a little bit and kind of stumbled a little bit, and Dad was like, put another one in him. So that's exactly what I did. It was a little bit of a worse shot, kind of wasn't necessary, but I did it anyway. And I don't know, he ran probably 20, 30 yards, maybe 40, and toppled over and talked on the radios, and we were like, we got one. So I'll play the clip of us walking up to it.
They're on it right now, he's dead.
You did it, bud. You did it. How we doing? Look at me. You did it, man. Yeah.
Super awesome and great experience. Here he is. Nothing super special, young buck, but there's a first for everything, and I'm proud that this is my first buck. So yeah, there you go. This is my biggest buck I've taken to date. We took him in a pretty familiar unit, a unit where they're known to be pretty good size. Opening morning, we get up really early, honestly almost too early. It's super dark, I don't know what time it was, probably 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, to hike up pretty much from camp this massive hill. We went up to the top, and we were hiking in the dark, and right as we got up there, the sun was starting to come up, and we just sat there because we were just listening and thinking we were hearing something. We didn't really know. We sat there for a little while, and then we very slowly started to creep along the edge. We were looking down in there. Very slowly, there were these giant rocks we were walking over. It was all interesting. And we kind of stopped for a little bit. My dad glassed, and he was like, there's a buck here. And then realized that there were 2 bucks. One of them was this one of them was a little bit of a smaller one, and they were sparring down in kind of the bottom of this area. that we were looking at. So, and we could hear it. And I think that's what we were hearing, was these two sparring. So we very slowly crept straight towards them so that they wouldn't be able to see us as easy. And the smaller one was out in the open when I got down and ready, and this one was behind a tree. And my dad was like, do you want to wait to take the bigger one? And I was like, definitely. So we waited probably 45 seconds and he came out into the open, and that was that. Drilled him. I had no idea if I hit him or not, but that was like, you got him. And we didn't quite know where he ran off to, because as soon as we shot, there was a third buck that came up. He was a lot smaller. He was a little 2-point, but still. So we were walking down, and these bucks, they look so similar to the brush. It's ridiculous. And we were like right where we were picking out the different trees and stuff that looked similar to where we shot him. And finally, that we were like probably 20 feet away from him. We didn't know. Dad looked over to my left, and he was like, there he is. And I was looking, and I was like, where? I couldn't find him. He was that camouflaged. So finally found him, walked over to him, and he was toast. So there you go. Really nice 3 on this side. Decent 3 on this side. Nice brow tines. And we named him Roger. I named him Roger. I don't really know why. The name just kind of came, and we stuck with it. So he was dressed at about 160 pounds. We didn't weigh him because, you know, it was out in the field, but that's what we think he was. And yeah, that's that.
Well, this is the very last buck I've taken. This was a buck taken this year. Bluebird weather, beautiful country, but not very good for hunting when it's so warm. So we were in some real thick timber and ended up spooking a deer coming across a trail, and we ended up finding him still standing there in these lodgepole pine about 30 yards away after looking into the lodgepoles for about 10 minutes. Barely found a shooting window, and I thought he was a little bit bigger than this, but it's good meat in the freezer for sure. So this is the process of what we do when we tan our own hide and mounts, do the mounts ourselves. So it's just in the process of completion.